Hey there, Drowsy Historian here. Tonight you're not a hero, a general, or the reincarnation of Julius Caesar. You're just another half-starved French conscript in an army that sees you as meat with legs. You didn't join to serve your country. You were volunteered, by fate, by poverty, by a bureaucrat who needed to meet his quota. The musket they handed you is older than your mother. Your boots are made of hope and cardboard, and the only certainty in your future is that you'll die far from home, likely in a ditch, possibly in pieces. So before you start marching toward your own frost-bitten epilogue, leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from, and which of your limbs you'd least mind losing to a cannonball. And if you'd like early access to more of these quiet reminders that human suffering was never reserved for villains, there's a link to the Patreon in the description. Now lie back and get comfortable. Let's begin. You didn't sign up. Not really. No one signs up to be cannon fodder unless they're hungry enough to chew the paper. But hunger is exactly what you had. Hunger in the gut, in the eyes, in the future. So when a man in a blue coat waved a coin and promised glory, or when the village mayor scribbled your name into the conscription register to fill his quota, you didn't object. Or maybe you were just standing too close to the wrong barn when the gendarmes showed up with a wagon. Doesn't matter now. You're property of the state, Napoleon's property to be precise, though he'll never learn your name. He doesn't need to. He already knows what you are. Disposable. You are French, which in theory makes you a citizen of the most advanced republic the world has ever seen. In practice, it means you're cold, lice-ridden, and just educated enough to spell your own death warrant. You can't read much, but the posters said something about honour. The priest muttered something about duty, and your uncle said it was better than starving. He also said war makes men. Of course, he only has one leg and screams at chickens now, so maybe don't take that as gospel. They give you a uniform that smells like whoever died in it last. It hangs wrong because it wasn't made for you. Nothing is. The jacket is too stiff, the trousers too short, and the buttons are either missing or stitched on with someone's hair. Your shoes, if you're lucky enough to get both of them, are made of boiled leather and desperation. The soles will last about as long as your optimism, which is to say, not very. The musket is a marvel of early 18th century engineering, despite the fact that it's the year 1806. It's long, heavy, and charmingly inaccurate. To fire it, you bite open a paper cartridge with your teeth, pour in powder, ram in the ball, prime the pan, and pray that it doesn't misfire. Spoiler, it will misfire, if you ever get to shoot it at all. And when it does work, it kicks like a mule and smokes like a chimney. You won't be able to see who you're killing, assuming you hit anything, which you won't. The officers are dressed like peacocks and speak as if they've already won. They're usually sons of someone important, noblemen pretending they earned their rank with courage, rather than connections. They tell you this is for the glory of France, that you're part of something greater. You wonder what part of greater includes marching barefoot across the Pyrenees, or freezing to death in a Latvian swamp. But you don't say that out loud because questioning authority is how you end up carrying a log through camp for 10 hours, while someone calls you a traitor. You are now part of a grand experiment in modern warfare, an army made up of peasants pretending to be patriots, led by men who think maps are more important than food. You'll be moved like a chess piece across territories you've never heard of, to fight people you've never met, in countries where they hate you for reasons you'll never understand. And if you die, your body will be used as a landmark for the next group. Back home, they call it La Gloire. In the songs, you're a brave son of the revolution, marching with fire in your heart and the eagle of France on your chest. In reality, you're a shivering wreck holding your trousers up with a rope, wondering if today is the day the lice finally kill you. There is no music where you are, only coughing, cursing, and the occasional sob that gets muffled before anyone hears it. Glory is for statues. You are made of meat. You are not special. You're not the protagonist. You're not the one who'll save the day. with a well-aimed shot or a stirring speech. You're the one who gets trampled when the cavalry retreats. You are one of hundreds of thousands, and when you die, and you will, they won't write your name. They'll write casualty, and they'll round it up or down, depending on the mood of the man holding the quill. There are pamphlets that say you'll be fed, that you'll be clothed, that you'll be paid. They don't mention when, or how little, or that your pay will be delayed until you're dead and no longer asking for it. Rations are a crust of bread and a finger of wine on good days. On bad days, it's dried peas and an old onion shared between 4 men. On worse days, you wait for the man next to you to die and check if he had anything left in his pockets. They say the emperor knows every man in his army by sight. They say he rides past the ranks and sees you. And maybe he does, just not long enough to notice that your musket has a cracked barrel and your boots are made of stitched-up mule hide. To him, you're a line in a ledger, a figure to balance, a shadow that marches and dies and doesn't complain too loudly. And if you do, there's always the firing squad. So yes, congratulations, you're now a soldier in Napoleon's Grande Armée. You'll march, you'll bleed, you'll starve, and you'll die. And if you're lucky, you'll do it in that order. But for now, tighten your belt, chew on your regrets, and keep your mouth shut. We've got a long way to go, and no one's going to carry you. Training is a generous word for what happens next. You're not so much taught as broken in, like a stubborn mule with aspirations. They take your name, your rags, and what's left of your self-respect, and replace them with numbers, shouting, and a sharp stick. You are now part of something called a regiment, though it mostly feels like a group punishment with matching clothes. The man in charge of moulding you into a soldier is a sergeant who's been in the army longer than he's been sober. He barks orders in a voice that sounds like it's been filtered through sandpaper and regret. His breath is mostly brandy, his philosophy mostly yelling, and his emotional range stops at disappointment. Your first lesson is marching. Not fighting, not surviving. Just walking in straight lines while being screamed at. You march until your feet blister, your spine aches, and your mind detaches entirely from your body. If you mess up, which you will, you start over. If someone else messes up, you all start over. The lesson is simple. Suffering is communal and blame is contagious. You're expected to move like one body, even though none of you know how your own legs work yet. There is no instruction on how to handle cold or hunger or wounds, but by God, you'll know how to pivot on command. Then there's the shouting. They love shouting. Orders are screamed, responses are screamed louder. Oui, sergeant, you bellow, until your throat is raw, though no one explains what you're agreeing to. There is no actual learning here, just repetition until the fear of punishment outweighs the confusion. You learn to follow commands without thought because thinking slows you down and asking questions gets you slapped. Obedience is drilled into your bones, not understanding. That's not an accident. The closest you get to combat training is bayonet practice, which mostly involves stabbing straw dummies that don't stab back. You lunge, you yell, you sweat. They tell you to imagine the enemy, but don't bother specifying which one. There are so many and frankly, it won't matter. You won't see them clearly when the smoke settles anyway. You're taught how to charge, how to stab downward, and how to twist the blade. Useful tips if you make it that far, though the average soldier doesn't. They don't teach you how to load your musket under fire, or what to do when your gun jams, or how to avoid the cannonball coming for your spleen. There is no target practice. Ammunition is too valuable to waste on improving your aim. You're told to shoot when they say shoot, and that's good enough. Whether you hit a man or a tree is beside the point. Most battles are just walls of smoke and screaming anyway. Accuracy is a luxury for officers and artists. For you, war will be chaos, and training prepares you beautifully for exactly none of it. Instead, most of your time is spent digging latrines, cleaning things that shouldn't be reused, or standing at attention for hours while someone decides whether or not it's time to scream again. You polish buttons that don't match and sweep dirt off dirt. If you ask why, you're punished. If you look like you're thinking about asking why, you're punished harder. Discipline is treated like a sacrament, pain in the name of progress. The goal is to make you forget you ever had a will of your own. The punishments are creative, in the worst way. There's extra marching, extra digging, public shaming, confinement in a hole that barely counts as a cell. One poor bastard in your unit mouthed off and spent 3 days tied to a cartwheel in the rain. When they cut him down, he couldn't walk for a week, but he sure didn't speak out again. Lessons are driven home, not with understanding, but with bruises. They tell you this builds character. What it builds is silence. You learn not to speak, not to ask, not to feel. You harden, but not in the heroic way the poems describe. Your heart doesn't become steel, it becomes calloused. You stop noticing when someone cries at night. You stop wondering why you haven't laughed in a week. You learn how to look busy when officers pass and how to sleep sitting up without falling over. These are your real skills now. You're given a vague pep talk about bravery, as if marching in a straight line toward artillery counts as courage. They say you're the vanguard of civilization, that you're fighting for liberty, fraternity, equality. Even though your sergeant calls you dog, your rations are smaller than a priest's breakfast, and the only equality you've seen is how everyone gets to suffer the same. The officers speak of honour, but they dine in tents while you eat beetle-infested bread next to a horse's backside. By the time training ends, and it never really ends, they just stop bothering. You're not ready. No one is. You're dressed like a soldier and smell like a stable, and you've learned how to march, shout, and stab things that don't move. You haven't held a loaded musket in weeks. You haven't learned what to do when someone next to you explodes. But the drums are beating, the banners are flying, and you're being sent off to war anyway. Because according to the men in charge, that's enough. You look the part. You'll die like one too. You meet your regiment the same way one meets a punch to the gut, suddenly, and with immediate regret. There's no ceremony, no warm welcome, no inspiring speeches, just a grizzled corporal who grunts your name, gestures vaguely at a row of human-shaped filth heaps, and tells you to find space. Space is relative, of course. What he means is wedge yourself between two men who haven't bathed since last harvest, and hope you don't roll into a puddle of piss during the night. You sleep in a barn, though calling it that is optimistic. It's more of a collapsing wooden apology for shelter. The roof leaks, the straw is damp, and every surface crawls. You lay head to toe to save space, which means someone's breath is in your feet, and your breath is in someone's socks. There's no bedding, just your lice-ridden coat and whatever warmth your neighbour's fever can offer. When it's cold, you huddle. When it's hot, you still huddle because the mosquitoes are worse than the heat. Lice are not a possibility. They're a guarantee. You can't see them at first, but you feel them. A crawling itch beneath the skin. A constant bite just beyond reach. You scratch until you bleed, and then you scratch more. Every seam in your uniform hides a colony. They lay eggs in the fabric, in your hair, in places you'd rather not think about. Some men try boiling their clothes, others try ashes, some even pray. None of it works. The lice are eternal. They outnumber the army. You get used to the smell. At first it turns your stomach. The mix of unwashed bodies, rotting leather, mildew, and human waste is overwhelming. But eventually, your senses dull. A mercy, really. No one smells good. No one smells neutral. Everyone smells like slow decay. The man next to you has dysentery. You know this because he tells you, in between trips to dig another shallow trench with his hands. The one across from you has trench foot. His boots are rotting along with his toes, and the smell is beginning to develop character. You will, in time, acquire both afflictions and more. Mealtimes are a group activity, in the same way disease transmission is. You all sit in a circle, swapping rumours, stale jokes, and whatever remains of the rations. You chew on biscuits so hard, you risk breaking teeth. They are older than you are. Sometimes you soak them in water or wine, if you're lucky, but mostly you just gnaw and pretend it's food. The stew, when it comes, is a thin broth containing pieces of meat that may once have known a cow. More often, it's just turnip water with extra salt and mystery. You eat it anyway. Hunger makes philosophers of you all, wondering if flavour ever really mattered to begin with. There is bonding here, strange as it sounds. Misery is the great equaliser. You laugh not because anything is funny, but because someone told a joke that wasn't worse than reality. You swap stories about girls back home you probably made up. You trade shirts, socks, insults. You learn to tell the difference between a cough that will pass and a cough that means you should start planning where to bury someone. You sing sometimes, badly, and only when you're sure the officers aren't listening. These men are not your friends, not exactly, but they are your only witnesses. If you vanish tomorrow, they're the ones who'll remember your name. For a little while at least, there is no hygiene routine. There is just mud and prayer. Washing is rare and always cold. Rivers are shared with livestock and corpses, and soap is considered contraband if the sergeant wants it for himself. You wipe your hands on your trousers, which doesn't clean them but does redistribute the filth nicely. You pick at your teeth with splinters. You clip your nails with a knife that's also used for slicing rat meat. You smell like a man who's given up on being a man and is just trying to be slightly less fungus. The officers do not live like you. They sleep in tents with blankets, eat salted meat, and bathe occasionally, though they still smell like horses and arrogance. They walk among you with handkerchiefs pressed to their noses, scowling at the mess as if it wasn't their idea. If they see you coughing, limping, or scratching too aggressively, they don't offer help. They offer extra duty. Because nothing cures disease like marching in circles with a pack twice your size. Occasionally, someone dies in the night. It happens quietly. A man who was coughing the day before goes still, and no one notices until morning. He's dragged outside, wrapped in his coat, and buried in a pit if one's available. More often, he's just left until the sergeant remembers to care. There's no ceremony, just another gap in the straw. His lice, of course, remain. They're quick to find a new home. By now, you've stopped flinching at the sound of retching. You don't bother swatting flies. You drink from a canteen that might be growing its own ecosystem. And you've accepted that diarrhea is more common than conversation. You are part of the regiment now, not because you passed some test or proved yourself in battle, but because you're still breathing and no one else has taken your spot in the straw. The war is never where you are. It's always just over the next ridge, across the next river, beyond the next village, someone already burned. So you walk. Not because you want to, not because you believe in anything, but because stopping means getting left behind. And getting left behind means dying alone in a ditch. Your orders are vague. Advance, regroup, redeploy. But the result is always the same. You wake up sore, you hoist your pack, and you start walking again. At first you keep track. You count days, towns, footsteps. You try to remember the names of rivers, the colour of soil, the taste of the air in each valley. But eventually, it all starts to blend. Every field looks like the last one. Every forest smells like rot and wet wool. You forget the names of villages as soon as you leave them, and you forget your own somewhere near the border. You're not a person anymore. You're a pair of legs wrapped in blisters, a sack of bone and sweat marching under threat of punishment. The road is not a road most of the time. It's a gash in the landscape, chewed by thousands of boots and wagon wheels. Mud is your constant companion. Sometimes it's thick enough to steal your shoes. Sometimes it swallows horses whole. Once it swallowed a man, and no one stopped to dig him out. You walk through snow, rain, sleet, and sun, often all in the same day. Your coat is never dry, your socks never warm. You learn to walk with water in your boots and pretend the squelch is normal. Food is a memory. You begin the march with rations, but they vanish quickly, eaten, spoiled or stolen. After that, it's whatever you can find. Wild onions, mouldy bread begged from peasants, a dead bird you spotted first. You chew bark just to pretend you're doing something. When luck is with you, you share a stew made from something vaguely mammalian. When luck isn't, you lick the inside of your empty ration tin and pretend it helps. Hunger isn't a feeling anymore. It's your new religion. Your feet are the first to go. The blisters burst, the skin peels off, and the nails turn black and fall away. Every step feels like walking on hot coals and broken glass. You stuff your boots with straw if you have it. When that runs out, you use rags, leaves, anything. Some men walk barefoot until the frost takes their toes. Others steal boots from the dead, if they're lucky enough to find someone close to their size. You learn not to get sentimental about corpses. You need what they're not using anymore. Sleep is a luxury. You drop wherever the column stops, in fields, in ditches, under trees if you're lucky, under horses if you're not. There's no such thing as comfort, only exhaustion so deep it drowns the pain. You don't dream, or if you do, they're not dreams worth remembering. Some men talk in their sleep, begging for food, crying for mothers they forgot years ago. You don't say anything. You just curl up, pull your coat tighter, and wait for morning, or for someone to kick you awake. The dead are always with you, sometimes literally. The cart at the rear of the column collects bodies until there's no room, then dumps them in shallow graves if the ground allows. If not, they're left by the side of the road, faces up, mouths open. You stop noticing after a while. You step around them, over them. You steal their socks, their belts, their bread if there's any left. You say a prayer if you're feeling human. Most days, you're not. You lose comrades the way you lose sleep. Gradually, then all at once. One day you're walking beside a man who tells you stories about his farm. The next, he's coughing blood, or wandering into the woods and never coming back. You stop asking names after a while. It's easier that way. You trade words for silence. You walk in a line of shadows, all of you moving forward out of fear, not faith. What are you marching toward? Doesn't matter, they haven't told you. You wouldn't believe them if they did. The officers ride, of course they do. They pass by on horses that look healthier than you've ever been. They shout orders you can't hear, consult maps that don't show hunger or frostbite. When they do dismount, it's only to inspect, to scowl, to punish. One gets stuck in the mud once, and the men laugh until the sergeant quiets them with threats. You savour that laugh for hours. It's the only thing that's warm. There is no destination. You march not to arrive, but because stopping means you're no longer useful. You are not a soldier so much as a pack animal in uniform, driven forward by drums, fear, and the promise of slightly less suffering up ahead. But there is no end. Only another road, another country that doesn't want you, another battle that doesn't care whether you've eaten. And so you keep walking, through blistering sun and freezing rain, through smoke and filth and grief, until the idea of rest becomes a fairy tale, and the only thing more familiar than the mud is the ache in your bones. You march until you forget the faces of your family, the taste of real bread, the way your name sounded in someone else's voice. You march until you forget you ever had a name at all. No one explains what it's actually like. They talk about courage, about duty, about honour, but they never tell you about the smell. Not the powder or the smoke, though there's plenty of that, but the stench of fear and fresh excrement as hundreds of grown men soil themselves in unison. You don't realise it's happened until you notice you've done it too. Your first battle begins before the bugles, before the flags. It begins in your stomach. You feel it sink and twist the moment you hear the cannons. That's not thunder. That's death. From a mile away, thrown by someone you'll never see. You line up with the others, shoulder to shoulder, in a field that looked green before the smoke rolled in. The officers pace behind you, shouting encouragement they don't believe. You're told to stay steady, hold formation, and wait for the signal. You are not allowed to run. Not because they think you're brave, but because you're surrounded, on one side by the enemy, and on the other by your own officers, who will shoot you for cowardice with less hesitation than they show tying their boots. You grip your musket so tightly, your hands ache. It's probably loaded wrong. You don't remember. You're not thinking clearly. No one is. The noise is impossible. Cannons boom, muskets crack, horses scream, men scream louder. The air is thick with smoke and iron and panic. You can't see more than a few feet in any direction. You feel heat, you hear shouting, and suddenly someone near you erupts. Not like in the stories, not a dramatic fall or noble death, just gone. A cannonball took him at the waist. One moment he was muttering a prayer, the next he was mist and meat. You taste blood, and you don't know if it's yours. Reloading is an ordeal. Your hands shake. The paper cartridge rips wrong. You drop your powder. The ramrod gets stuck. Your musket misfires. You try again. You are not aiming. There's no point. You fire toward the smoke, toward shapes that might be men, and hope you don't hit your own. Friendly fire isn't rare. It's expected. You're all firing blind. You've already seen 2 men go down from musket balls that definitely came from the wrong direction. No one stops to apologize. Drums beat somewhere in the chaos, but they don't help. Orders are shouted and lost in the din. You hear men yelling in French, then in German, then nothing at all. Your officer is gone. Maybe dead. Maybe just smarter than the rest and already running. A horse with no rider barrels past, eyes wild, hooves slick with gore. It knocks a man down and keeps going. You step over the body. There's no time to check. You think you see the enemy. Just shadows in the haze, but then they're real and they're close, and they have bayonets. You remember the straw dummy. You remember the drills. You try to stab and scream, but it comes out like a whimper. You lunge, you miss. Someone else lunges back. Steel meets flesh, maybe yours. You don't feel it right away. The adrenaline is too strong. You're running now, or stumbling, or falling. You don't know. You don't care. You just want out. There is no glory, no trumpet call, no slow motion moment of triumph. There's mud and blood and noise so loud, it flattens thought. Men fall and writhe and are trampled by their friends. Some shoot themselves in the foot to get out of it. Others just collapse from terror. The bravest man you know is sobbing into the dirt. The cruelest one is curled in a ball begging for his mother. You envy them both. Time stops working. A minute lasts an hour vanishes in an instant. You don't know how long you've been in this. You don't know where you are. You can't hear. The ringing in your ears is constant now. You taste dirt. Your shoulder is bruised from recoil. Your cheek is cut. Someone's hand is on your leg, but it's not attached to anyone anymore. Eventually, the smoke begins to clear. Not because the fighting stops, but because there's no one left to keep it going. The ground is a churned mess of limbs, uniforms, and broken steel. The moaning starts to rise, low at first, then building into a chorus of agony that makes you want to cover your ears and never uncover them again. You are still standing. You're not sure how. You see men crawling, dragging themselves through mud, calling for water, for medics, for death. The surgeons arrive late, overwhelmed and under-equipped. There are no stretchers, just blankets or spare coats. You help carry someone with half a face back to the camp, though no one thinks he'll make it. You don't know his name. You never asked. It's easier that way. That night, you don't sleep. You lie there with your eyes open, heart still pounding, clothes still damp with someone else's blood. You try to remember if you fired your musket. You think you did. Once, maybe twice. You try to count how many men died. You give up. The number doesn't matter. They're gone. You're not. That's the only math anyone cares about. And just like that, you're a veteran. You've seen battle. You've stood in a field and watched the world come apart around you. You survived, which is supposed to mean something. But mostly, it means you'll have to do it again tomorrow. You don't hear the shot that hits you. That's the first insult. No whistle, no echoing crack, no cinematic pause, just the sudden feeling that your leg has turned to fire, and meat. You fall. Hard, mud in your teeth, blood down your boots. The musket drops from your hand, but you don't notice. All you can see is red, spreading fast and thick across your trousers, like you've spilled wine at the worst dinner party in Europe. You scream, then stop. It takes too much effort. Your mouth is open, but no sound comes out, just froth and a whimper you'd be ashamed of if your thigh wasn't pouring itself into the dirt. Someone shouts for help, but it's not for you. No one's looking. Men are dying louder nearby. A horse gallops past and nearly crushes your hand. You crawl. Somewhere. Anywhere. Somewhere that doesn't smell like powder and excrement and death. Eventually, you're dragged behind a makeshift barricade, a pile of corpses mostly. You don't care. You're too busy trying not to pass out. Or maybe you already have. Time stops meaning anything once your brain is half on fire. When you open your eyes again, you're somewhere worse. It's called a hospital, but that's generous. More like a butcher's stall with dreams of grandeur. The roof leaks. The floor isn't a floor, just mud and blood and straw, pretending not to be filth. You're on a wooden table, or a door someone's repurposed. The surgeon leans over you, squinting like he's diagnosing a bad roast. His apron is already stained with someone else's insides. His tools are dull, unwashed, and probably cursed. No morphine, no antiseptic, no prayer worth uttering, just brandy, if you're lucky, and a dirty piece of leather to bite down on when the blade starts digging. You get neither. They've run out. Of course they have. The surgeon mutters something about missed the bone like it's good news. You don't feel lucky. The ball tore through muscle and tendon, and what's left of your thigh looks like a torn saddlebag. He digs into the wound like he's mining for coal. You bite your own hand, trying not to scream, and taste copper. Someone vomits behind you. It might be you. Stitches come next. Rough thread. Thick needle. No gentleness. He pulls your skin back together like he's sewing a sack of potatoes. You black out again. Blessedly. When you wake, you're in a tent. Sort of. Fabric above you, straw beneath, and groans on every side. The smell is unbearable. Blood. Pus. Shit. Desperation. Your leg feels like it's still being cut, only slower now. It pulses with heat and horror. You try to sit up, but your vision goes black, and the world spins like a coin about to drop. For days you drift. Fever comes, fever stays. You sweat through every layer they've given you, then freeze when it breaks. Men die around you. No one moves them. Their bodies become part of the air, the atmosphere, the inevitable. Somehow, your wound doesn't rot, not all the way. The bleeding slows. The pus drains. The pain becomes something manageable, which means you only cry once a day instead of every time you move. A man across from you loses his leg entirely. Another dies of something no one names. You don't ask. You don't talk much anymore. You don't sleep well either. Every time your eyes close, you see the battlefield again. The flash of a cannon, the sound of bones cracking, the way a man near you turned inside out before he even had time to scream. You'd rather be unconscious, but the fever has left, and now you're just stuck. Awake, wounded, and aware. Eventually, they say you're well enough to return. Not to a proper hospital, not to your village. Number to camp. Back to the regiment. Back to the war. You're still useful after all. You have 2 arms. You can hold a gun. You can march, sort of. Limp, mostly. It doesn't matter. You're alive, and that means you're property. The wound never really heals. It closes, yes. The flesh knits badly, scarred and stiff, but it aches, constantly. When it rains. When it's cold. When you lie too long in one position. Your gait is ruined. You list to one side like a half-sunken ship. The others make room for you without speaking. They know that walk. They've seen it before. You're not whole anymore, but that's not unique. Everyone's missing something. A toe, a finger, a sense of purpose. You join the line again, limping in rhythm, dragging yourself toward the next disaster with all the enthusiasm of a condemned man tying his own noose. You're lucky, they tell you, and you believe them, because somehow this counts as luck. You've taken a town, that's what the officer says anyway, as if it's something noble. In reality, it means the enemy ran out of bullets, or the will to fight before you did. It means the streets are full of smoke, the houses half-shelled, and the civilians too scared to look you in the eye. You're not greeted as a liberator. You're not even really greeted. You just arrive, filthy, armed and starving, and begin occupying a place that clearly wants you gone. The orders say, protect the townspeople, respect private property, preserve the sanctity of churches, homes, and women. Your stomach says otherwise. So does your captain, though he never puts it in writing. He nods in the general direction of a bakery and mutters something about requisitioning supplies. You and the rest of the men know what that means. If it's not nailed down, it's yours. If it is nailed down, you pry harder. You start with food, always food. You kick in doors, tear open cellars, ransack pantries. You eat whatever you find, bread gone stale, root vegetables meant to last the winter, pickled things you can't identify but don't question. You steal wine and meat if you're lucky, salt and onions if you're not. You fight with other soldiers over a loaf. One man stabs another over a jar of lard. The officers look the other way. Hunger makes brutes of everyone. Then come the clothes, dry socks, unpatched trousers, coats that don't smell like corpse rot, all up for grabs. You swap uniforms for civilian coats, not because they're warmer, but because they don't reek of death. Jewellery disappears. So do candles, knives, combs and pots. Someone walks off with a grandfather clock, dragging it through the street like a trophy. No one stops him. No one laughs either. You tell yourself it's just surviving. You're not looting. You're scavenging. You're not stealing. You're taking what you need to keep marching, keep fighting, keep breathing. The civilians don't seem to understand the distinction. They watch from behind shutters, quiet and pale. Some beg, some cry, a few scream, and those are the ones who usually get hit. Not fatally, not always, but hard enough to remind them who's in charge now. The line between soldier and criminal blurs fast. There's no pay, no supplies, no justice. You do what you must, and then a little more, because everyone else is. You break into homes not for food, but because you can. You search rooms out of boredom. You flip through books in languages you can't read. Tear paintings off walls. Rifle through drawers for keepsakes you don't need. One man finds a wedding dress in a trunk. He laughs. Then he sets it on fire. Churches are no safer. The captain tells you not to touch them. Sacred ground, he says, but then disappears for a few hours, and when he returns, the silver is missing from the altar, and the wine casks are half empty. A few of the men piss in the font. Someone smashes a statue of the Virgin with a musket butt. You don't stop them. You don't even flinch. You just sit on a pew and eat stolen cheese, watching the candles flicker like they're trying to leave the room. The civilians don't resist. They know better. A few try hiding things. Bread buried in gardens, jewellery in chimneys, children in cupboards. The soldiers find most of it, not all. You hope some of them kept something. You hope someone lied well enough to keep their last loaf. It makes you feel marginally more human. You start to feel dirty in a new way, not just from mud and lice and blood, but from something deeper. You catch yourself laughing at things that aren't funny. You look at a sobbing child and feel nothing, not even pity, just exhaustion. Your reflection, and when you catch one in a broken mirror or puddle, looks like someone else. Eyes hollow, skin grey, mouth always half open, like you're waiting for someone to explain how it came to this. Some men try to make it right. They leave coins for what they take, even when the coins are worthless. One man helps an old woman board up her door, then steals her potatoes an hour later. Another keeps a child from being trampled in a stampede, then brags about bedding her sister. You'd call them monsters, but they look just like you. They are you more or less. Just a different day, a different hunger, a different line crossed. There's no punishment. The army doesn't have the time or the will to deal with ethics. As long as the regiment keeps moving, no one asks what happened in the towns it leaves behind. The officers log foraging in their reports and call it done. The town you just sacked will become a name in a letter, a footnote on a campaign map. No one will speak of the girl with the bruised arm or the man left bleeding in the alley. Eventually, you're ordered to move on. You don't look back. Not because you don't care, but because looking would force you to think. And thinking right now is dangerous. You shoulder your pack, now heavier with other people's belongings, and march back into the mud. You tell yourself you had no choice, that it was the war, that you're still a soldier. But deep down, you know better. You weren't fighting anymore. You were feeding, and the war didn't make you like this. It just gave you permission. You thought you knew misery. You thought marching through France in wet boots was the worst of it. You thought hunger was bad when all you had for dinner was mouldy bread and half a rat. But that was before Russia. That was before winter. That was before the cold stopped being a nuisance and started becoming a predator, silent, slow, and absolutely merciless. You're not a soldier anymore. You're a body in slow motion, trying not to die faster than the men around you. It starts with the wind. You've never felt anything like it. It doesn't blow, it slices. Your coat, already threadbare and crusted with weeks of filth, might as well be paper. Your gloves are gone, stolen, lost, or used as kindling by someone with colder fingers. Your breath fogs the air until it freezes on your face. Ice crusts your lashes. Your nose bleeds. You learn quickly not to remove your boots, no matter how much your toes scream, because once you do, you may never get them back on. You walk anyway, because you have to, because stopping means death. The rations stop coming. First it's just delays, then excuses, then silence. Supply wagons vanish into the snow, looted or frozen or swallowed by roads that don't exist. The countryside is empty, stripped clean by the Russians as they retreated. The towns are ash and silence. The wells are poisoned. The barns are burnt. There's nothing left to forage, nothing left to steal. And yet you keep marching, because the orders haven't changed, and no one dares admit what's coming. Horses die first. They stumble, collapse, and stop breathing before they hit the ground. At first, it's a tragedy. Then it's dinner. You skin them quickly, clumsily, not caring about cuts or blood or bones. You eat meat half-cooked or raw if there's no time. The hunger is bigger than your fear of disease. Then you start boiling leather, belts, saddles, your own boots. The broth tastes like dirt and desperation. It doesn't help, but you tell yourself it does because the only other option is to stop believing in anything. Frostbite becomes a daily routine. Fingers turn white, then black, then fall off. Toes rot in your boots. Men scream when their ears snap off in their sleep. One morning a man wakes up and can't move his legs. He freezes to death before noon. Another slices off his own foot, hoping the infection won't reach higher. It does. He dies 2 days later, raving about soup and sunlight. You stop offering help. You don't have any to give. Your uniform is a joke. Holes everywhere, no warmth left. You wrap your hands in whatever you can find. Cloth, straw, scraps from the dead. You tear lining from abandoned carts. You stuff your coat with grass. None of it works. The cold finds you anyway. It gets into your lungs, your teeth, your bones. Your breath rattles. Your skin cracks. You learn to keep moving, even when you stop feeling your legs. The dying becomes background noise. You don't even turn your head anymore when someone collapses. It happens constantly. You just keep walking, eyes fixed forward, one step at a time. You recognize the smell of rot under snow. You memorize the color of dead lips. You know exactly what a man looks like, 10 seconds before he gives up. It's a look you've seen in a mirror, if you've had the strength to glance. Cannibalism is never discussed, but it happens, quietly, desperately, A soldier dies in the night, and by morning the body is lighter. You don't ask questions. You don't want the answers. You just note the missing fingers, the cleaned ribs, the odd warmth on someone's face that didn't come from a fire. You'd say you'd never do it, but you're not as sure as you used to be. Hunger rewrites your morals in blood. The officers stop pretending. They ride past you, gaunt and silent, their horses barely upright. No more shouting, no more speeches, just grim faces and disappearing ranks. The Grande Armée is unravelling, men deserting, dying, killing each other for a crust of bread or the warmth of a corpse. You start marching in smaller groups, then alone. The army isn't an army anymore. It's just a direction. You lose track of the date. You don't know how long it's been since the invasion began. The days blur, endless white and grey, the crunch of snow under boots, the weight of hunger like a second pack on your shoulders. You stop thinking about France, about home, about survival. Now it's just about staying upright for one more hour, one more step. Eventually you reach a river, a frozen crossing. The ice groans beneath you as hundreds try to make it across. Some make it, some fall through. You hear the screams under the surface, sharp and brief. No one stops, no one reaches in. You keep walking, you don't even look down. By the time you're told the retreat is official, it's a joke. There's nothing to retreat with. The army is gone. The men who remain are barely shadows. You've eaten things you'll never confess. You've seen things you'll spend the rest of your life forgetting. If you make it out, and that's still a very big if, you'll never be the same. But then again, you stopped being yourself somewhere back in the snow. The Russian winter doesn't kill with bullets or blades. It kills slowly, softly. It kills your hope, your memory, your sense of self. It leaves you hollow and frozen, walking west with 1,000-yard stare and a stomach full of nothing. You thought battle was the worst part of war, but battle ends, winter doesn't. And neither, it seems, does this march. Retreat isn't what they told you it would be. It's not an organised fallback or a tactical repositioning. It's not a brave regrouping of tired men with noble hearts and stiff upper lips. It's not even running. Running implies urgency, adrenaline, motion. This is different. This is walking backward while bleeding. It's limping west through snow and smoke, through forests stripped of bark and villages stripped of people. It's a slow-motion collapse, and you're just one more body trying not to fall at the same time as everyone else. There's no formation anymore. No banners, no songs, no trumpets or orders or clear destination. You wake up, if you slept at all, and you walk. Not because someone told you to, the officers stopped giving commands days ago, but because the other option is lying down and letting the cold claim you. Every morning, a few more don't get up. They're frozen, curled into themselves, their faces half covered with snow, their fingers black and brittle. No one buries them, no one weeps. You just step around the body and keep moving. Food is gone. Not scarce, gone. The last wagon of supplies disappeared weeks ago, stolen, burned, or consumed by men who died with crumbs still on their lips. Now you eat whatever you find. Bark, bones, handfuls of snow. If a horse collapses nearby, there's a frenzy. Men ripping it apart with knives, teeth, bare hands. You've eaten worse. If you haven't, you will soon. There's no shame left, no dignity. Hunger has eaten that too. There is no leadership. The officers are either dead, deserting, or pretending not to be responsible for any of this. The ones still mounted don't speak. They just ride past with faces like stone, barely recognisable beneath frost and filth. Some have taken off their insignia. Better to look like a common soldier than be targeted by your own men. Because mutiny is no longer a rumour, it's a tool. Orders are ignored. Fights break out over scraps. Knives come out over firewood. You stop trusting anyone. You keep to yourself. That's safer. Every hour feels longer than the last. Your body is no longer yours. It's a shell, cracked, aching, leaking at the edges. You've forgotten what it felt like to be warm, or clean, or full. You sleep in shallow pits, wrapped in your own coat and someone else's blood. If you're lucky, you find a corpse to curl against. The body heat helps. You tell yourself they'd understand. You don't ask permission. The dead don't object. Some men desert. They peel off in the night, thinking they'll find safety in the trees or mercy in a distant farmhouse. They don't. You find their bodies later, frozen, looted, their boots missing, their eyes open. The locals want nothing to do with you. To them, you're a plague, a threat, a symbol of all the destruction that's come, and all that's still coming. They hide their food, bar their doors, and set traps. Some of them shoot on sight. You don't blame them. You start to dream of capture. Not freedom, not victory, capture. Because the enemy might feed you. They might give you a blanket. They might not shoot you out of spite. That's more kindness than you've seen in weeks. You fantasize about being taken prisoner the way you once fantasized about going home. A fire, a bed, soup you didn't have to fight for. It's a twisted hope, but it's the only one left. The myth of honor in retreat dies quickly. You were told it was brave to endure, to carry on. But enduring what exactly? There's no strategy here, no cause. Just dead men walking in the wrong direction, hoping the next ridge holds fewer corpses than the last. There's no honor in this. There's no glory. There's just survival, ugly, bitter, and unpaid. You see men walking without shoes, others without coats, some without eyes. One man carries his own frost-bitten toes in a rag, as if someone might want them later. Another marches with his dead brother's body slung over his shoulders, refusing to let go. No one questions it. Everyone carries something, a burden, a wound, a name they can't forget, or a face they wish they could. You stop thinking in days, you stop thinking altogether. You just follow the footprints in front of you, putting one foot down and praying the other will follow. You forget why you came. You forget where you're going. You forget who you are. There's only the march, only the cold, only the hope that maybe, just maybe, this isn't how you'll die. But honestly, you probably will. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon. Quietly. Like the others. No dramatic last words, no memorial. Just another body in the snow, half covered, half forgotten. Another ghost with a musket, and no more miles left in his boots. And when it happens, it won't be a tragedy. It won't be a story passed down or a lesson in courage. It will just be one less mouth to feed, one less shadow in the long grey line heading west. You'll fall, someone will glance, no one will stop, because the retreat doesn't care who dies. It just wants you to keep walking until you can't. You didn't mean to get captured. No one does? Maybe you collapsed from hunger and didn't wake up in time to keep marching. Maybe you got separated from your unit and walked into the wrong barn. Maybe you dropped your musket during the retreat, slipped on ice, or just stood there too long when someone shouted surrender. It doesn't matter. One moment you were a soldier, or something close to it, and now you're a prisoner. Congratulations, things are about to get worse in new and exciting ways. If you're captured by the Russians, you'll learn the true meaning of slow death. They don't shoot you. They don't beat you to death. That would take effort. Instead, they just put you somewhere cold. A barn, a shed, a half-collapsed prison fort, and leave you there with other Frenchmen who are too tired to stand and too scared to sleep. You're given food once every few days. A ladle of grey porridge, maybe. A potato, if someone's feeling festive. The guards don't speak your language, and even if they did, they wouldn't waste words on you. Their boots speak loud enough. The cold is constant. You thought you understood winter during the retreat, but that was motion. This is stillness. This is lying in a pile of straw with no fire, pressed between dying men for warmth that won't last. Your coat is frozen to your skin. Your breath turns to frost on your lips. You lose sensation in your fingers, then your toes, then the part of your brain that used to care about surviving. The straw's full of lice, the walls are full of holes, your stomach is full of nothing. You sleep in shifts, not because you're standing watch, but because the nightmares feel too much like memory. Disease sweeps through the camp like it's trying to win a race. Typhus, dysentery, gangrene, you name it. The guards do nothing. If you die, they bury you in a shallow pit out back if they remember. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes your body just lies there for days, stiff and curled, until someone rolls you out of the way to make room for the next soon-to-be corpse. You don't even flinch when someone coughs blood beside you. You just hope you're not breathing it in. If you're captured by the Spanish, it's a different kind of misery. Hotter, louder, and full of vengeance. You're not just an enemy soldier here. You're a symbol of occupation, of everything they've lost and everything you helped ruin. They hate you, personally, viscerally. You're locked in stone jails that haven't seen maintenance since the Inquisition. The food is worse than Russian slop, if that's even possible. A piece of hard bread that smells like mould and regret. A handful of beans, occasionally nothing at all. The guards are cruel in a way that's not about orders, it's about pleasure. Some like to beat you for amusement. Others ask questions you can't answer, and then punish you for not answering. You're tied to posts and left in the sun, or the rain, or wherever they think you'll suffer more. You hear stories of men being executed just for sport. You start to believe them. You hear screaming at night. Sometimes it's from the guards. Sometimes it's from your cellmates. Sometimes it's from yourself. Still, you envy the men who die quickly. Because in Spanish custody, it's not the pain that breaks you. It's the slow erosion of everything else. Your pride, your hope, your identity. You forget what day it is, what month. You forget your own rank, if you ever had one. You start to understand what it means to be less than a man. To be meat in uniform, locked in a cell, hated by the world, and utterly forgotten. If, by some miracle, you're captured by the British, you've hit the closest thing to mercy you're going to find. They don't torture you. They don't freeze you. They feed you just enough to keep you from dying. Watery stew, dry bread, maybe even tea if the guards are feeling sentimental. You're given a bunk, shared with a dozen others, and a blanket thin enough to be theoretical. No warmth, but at least it's yours. You might even get to wash once a week with soap and everything. It feels like sin, but don't mistake survival for salvation. The British don't kill you with violence, they kill you with time. The boredom is suffocating. Days blend together. There are no drills, no duties, no battles, just waiting. Waiting for peace, for a trade, for someone to remember you exist. You stare at the same four walls for months, maybe years. You read whatever books you can find. You play cards with men you once shot at. You go mad very, very slowly. The officers are polite. That makes it worse. They speak to you with condescension, dipped in honey, always just a little too nice, a little too practiced. They want you docile. They want you grateful. And the truth is, you almost are. You start to feel like maybe they're not so bad. Then you remember your friends who never made it to captivity, the ones who bled out in the snow or rotted in barns, and you hate yourself for thinking warm soup is worth forgiveness. Every day you're a prisoner, you get a little smaller. Not in body necessarily, though the hunger does that too, but in spirit. You shrink, you quiet, you learn to wait, to endure, to keep your head down and your mouth shut. You don't plan escape, you don't plan anything, you just survive. If you're lucky, you'll be traded. If you're not, you'll die in a cage with your name scratched into a bunk and no one to remember it. Eventually, someone decides you're no longer worth feeding. Maybe the war ends, maybe a treaty is signed. Maybe the guard just gets tired of seeing your face. There's no celebration, no farewell, not even a hot meal. One day, a gate opens. You're pointed in a direction. And then you're walking, limping mostly, toward a home you're not sure still exists. Somehow you survive. Whether by luck, stubbornness, or the sheer indifference of death deciding to pass you by, you make it. You limp, you wheeze, you cough blood into your sleeve, but you keep moving. Eventually, someone stamps a paper, someone else waves you through a checkpoint, and you realise you're no longer in enemy territory. You're back in France. You're home. Or at least, you're on land that used to mean something to you before everything you knew was reduced to mud and meat. The journey home isn't triumphant. There's no parade, no flags, no band playing marches for the heroes of the empire. You hitch rides on carts when your leg gives out. You beg bread from strangers who don't recognise the tattered uniform or care about the stories behind the stains. You sleep in ditches when the roads are too long, or in barns when the farmers don't turn you away. You smell like everything they're afraid of: war, poverty, disease. You don't blame them for keeping their distance. When you reach your village, it doesn't feel like a return. It feels like trespassing. Nothing is where it should be. The roads have been repaved, the baker's shop is gone, the church has a new bell, and you don't recognise the face ringing it. Children you don't know stare at you from behind their mother's skirts, and the old men on the bench don't nod. You try to find someone who remembers you, someone who might say, "You made it back," but all you get are blank looks and hesitant greetings. They thought you were dead. Some still do. You're not sure they're wrong. The girl you loved is married now, to someone with both legs, both eyes, and a farm that didn't burn down. She doesn't scream when she sees you, just blinks a few times, then offers a soft smile, like you're a ghost she once dreamed about. She asks if you want to come in. You say no. You both know the visit would only confirm what you're already pretending not to feel. Your family, if they're still alive, doesn't know what to say. You don't either. The conversation is polite, distant. They ask about the war, you lie. You say it was hard but honourable, that you did your duty, that you're proud to have served. You don't mention the lice or the dead men you slept beside, or the time you stole a blanket from a dying friend because you were colder than guilty. They nod, relieved by your silence. No one wants the truth. They want the myth, and they want it quietly. There's no pension waiting for you, no back pay, no medal, no letter of thanks from the emperor. Just the rags on your back, a cane that barely holds your weight, and a few ugly memories that wake you up most nights, soaked in sweat. You go to the mayor's office to ask if there's any assistance for veterans. The clerk doesn't look up from his paperwork. He tells you they're still sorting things out, that you'll be notified, that you should be patient. You nod and leave before you start shouting. You try to find work, but no one needs a farmhand who limps, a labourer with half a hand, a teacher who can't sleep without screaming. You offer to chop wood, carry loads, fix roofs. You're told there's nothing at the moment. You hear people whisper after you leave. The words unstable and damaged come up more than once. They say it like they're talking about a barn that can't be repaired. You stop asking. The nights are the worst. You lie awake listening to the quiet and wishing for noise. Not the screaming kind, but any kind. Because the silence feels heavier now, like it's pressing on your chest. You miss the horrible closeness of the camp, the smell of wood smoke and wet wool, the voices of men who shared your misery. You hated them sometimes, but they understood. Out here, no one does. You're alone in a way you weren't even at war. You stop telling people where you've been. It doesn't matter. They don't want to know, and you're tired of watching their eyes glaze over as you talk. You try writing it down once, a letter to no one. You burn it before finishing the second page. Some things aren't meant to be shared. Some things stay inside you like old shrapnel. Too deep to remove, too painful to ignore. People call you lucky. You nod, because it's easier than explaining why that word feels like a joke. You walk through the town square and try to remember who you were before the uniform. You can't. You watch boys play with wooden swords and feel nothing. You hear the blacksmith shout about a shipment delay and want to scream back that at least no one's dying, but you don't. You just walk past him and disappear down a side street. You made it home. That's what they'll say, years from now. That you were one of the few, that you survived. But you know better. You didn't come back. Not really. You left something behind out there, and whatever returned in your place isn't quite whole. You're a story no one wants to hear. A reminder they'd rather forget. And you've never felt more alone. The war doesn't end when you come home. It just stops being someone else's problem. You're back technically. You breathe the air, you walk the streets, you nod when someone nods at you. But you're not really there. Not all of you. Some part of you is still in Russia, or Spain, or some muddy field in Saxony, where half your regiment evaporated into smoke and blood. You sleep in a bed now, under a roof, but that doesn't matter. The dreams still find you. They come every night. Not at first, maybe. At first you're too numb, too exhausted to feel anything. But eventually, your mind catches up. And when it does, it punishes you for surviving. You see faces, hear screams, smell burning wool and rotting teeth. Sometimes you wake shouting. Sometimes you wake choking, clawing at your own throat because you swore someone was standing over you. Other times, you don't wake at all, but lie there stiff and sweating while your heart hammers against your ribs like it's trying to escape. Your leg, the one you lost, still hurts. You know it's not there, but it burns anyway. Itches, twitches. Some days it feels like it weighs more than the rest of you. You slap it, you scream at it, you cry because it won't shut up. No one knows what to say. They just look away when you start limping in circles, cursing something that isn't real. You don't blame them. You wouldn't want to deal with you either. So you start drinking. First, it's just to help you sleep. Then it's to help you wake up. Then it's because you can't think of a reason not to. You tell yourself it's under control, that you're just taking the edge off. But the edge grows sharper every day, and soon the bottle is the only thing that understands you. You stop pacing. You start slurring. You stop remembering the dreams. You start forgetting the days. Taverns become your church. You go every night. Not for the company, though there's always someone to talk to. Someone worse off. Someone too drunk to notice how far you've fallen. You go for the noise, the smoke, the numbness. Sometimes you fight. You don't know why. Someone bumps you, or says the wrong thing, or just looks at you like they've never had to bury a friend in frozen ground. You hit them, or they hit you, and it feels good. Not the pain, but the clarity, the brief flash of being present again. You lose teeth, you gain scars, you get banned from places, then unbanned, then banned again. People start crossing the street to avoid you. Friends, the few who stuck around, stop inviting you places. You stop asking why. You stop caring. You become background noise in your own life. Someone to be tolerated, maybe pitied, never truly seen. Your body follows the rest of you into decline. The stump doesn't heal properly. It aches in the rain. It bleeds if you walk too far. Your back hurts from the uneven gait. Your joints swell, and your hands tremble when you try to hold anything too long. Your teeth loosen. Your vision blurs. You don't go to the doctor. You can't afford it. And even if you could, what would he say? You're not sick. You're just worn out. Some days you don't get out of bed. You stare at the ceiling for hours, not thinking, not dreaming, just floating in some empty place inside your head. Other days you walk until your leg gives out, and then sit in the dirt until someone tells you to move. You start crying more often, not loud, not dramatic, just quiet tears that come for no reason, and leave just as quietly. You forget what it feels like to laugh without guilt. People stop asking about the war, not because they think it's over, but because they know your answer won't be the one they want. You tried telling the truth once, described what it felt like to hold a dying man's hand while waiting for a cannonball to find you next. They changed the subject before you finished. You got the message. You tried to pray once, but the words feel dry in your mouth. You try to write, but the sentences don't make sense. You try to clean yourself up, sober up, sit up straight, and shave and smile like you remember how. But the mirror doesn't cooperate. The man staring back looks like he lost something important and can't remember what it was. You are not a veteran. You are not a hero. You are a tool, broken, dulled, tossed aside now that the job is done. No one wants to hear about the horrors you carried home in your lungs. They just want you to stop shouting at shadows, to stop smelling like wine and regret, to get over it, as if there's something on the other side of this, as if the man who marched away could ever come back. You survived the war, that's the story they tell, but the truth is simpler and much sadder. The war didn't kill you, it just didn't let you die. You fought for something once, maybe not clearly, maybe not loudly, but deep down you told yourself it had meaning. Liberty, maybe. The Republic. France. Whatever it was, it got blurrier each time someone died in your arms, but you still believed in the man at the top, the one who told you it all mattered. Napoleon. The little general with the big promises, the one who said your suffering would build a better world. He was the reason you marched, the reason you bled, the reason you kept going long after you should have stopped. And now he's gone, exiled, they say, shipped off to a rock in the sea with a title but no power. They call it justice, or peace, or the end of an era. You call it what it is, but a farce. He got a villa and a staff. You got a stump and a pension that never arrived. He gets to write his memoirs. You can't even hold a pen steady. He was the architect of your misery, and somehow he landed softer than anyone else. The man who ordered 250,000 of you into Russia now lives somewhere warm, and you're still picking frostbite out of your memories. But it doesn't last. It never does. A few years pass and suddenly he's back. Just like that. Walks in from the coast like nothing happened. They say the soldiers sent to arrest him joined his march instead. That they threw down their guns and cried with joy. You wonder what kind of men those were, what they hadn't yet seen, because anyone who followed him a second time must have missed the first half of the nightmare. So the war returns, briefly, violently, stupidly. You don't go this time, can't, wouldn't. They don't ask you. You're too old, too broken, too used up to be of any use, but you watch the young ones march away in clean uniforms and polished boots, their heads high with ideas you no longer understand. You want to stop them, shake them, tell them what's waiting, but you don't. They wouldn't listen, you didn't either. Then Waterloo happens, the final battle, they say. Napoleon loses, again, this time for good. He's shipped off farther away, somewhere even more forgotten, somewhere the sea can't even be bothered to visit. The monarchy returns, the flags change, the names change. The empire becomes history. You're supposed to feel something about that. Pride, maybe, closure, relief. You feel nothing. The cause you suffered for is now a footnote. The victories you bled for are now just awkward paragraphs in textbooks. The borders redrawn, the treaties signed, the generals pensioned off, and the men you buried, they stay buried. No treaty brings them back. No monarch honours them. The medals they gave you, if you got any, are meaningless. Shiny little lies you keep in a box, too ashamed to display, too bitter to throw away. The war ends, your war doesn't. The town puts up a plaque, something tasteful, a list of names etched in stone, most spelled wrong. People gather once a year to look solemn for half an hour, and then go back to their dinners. You stand at the edge of the crowd and stare at the stone. Your name isn't on it. You're still alive after all. Lucky you. When people talk about the past now, they use words like glory and legacy. They talk about Napoleon as if he was some tragic genius, misunderstood and majestic. They speak of battles you survived like they were plays in a theatre. Names like Austerlitz and Borodino float on the air like music. And no one mentions the piles of bodies or the way the wounded screamed in the night. You want to shout, to correct them, to remind them. But you've done that before, and it never works. They prefer the lie. You try to find purpose in the new world. A job, a role, a reason. But the country doesn't need you anymore. It needs workers, farmers, fathers. You're none of those. You drift through streets that were rebuilt without you, past families that don't know your name, past fields sown by men who never left. You wonder if they were right, if staying was always the smarter move. Sometimes you hear rumours of other veterans, living ghosts like you, scattered across the country. One drinks himself blind in Lyon, another mutters to himself on a corner in Rouen. You think about visiting, but you don't. What would you say? What could they say that you haven't already heard in your own head 1,000 times? You lost your faith somewhere along the way, in the emperor, in the nation, in the idea that any of this ever mattered. You don't say it out loud, of course. That would be treason or madness, or worse, honesty. So you smile when prompted, nod when required, and spend your evenings watching the sun set like it's something you're supposed to be grateful for. The emperor fell, twice, and yet somehow, you're still the one paying the price. He's history now, studied, debated, glorified. You're something less, a leftover. A scrap of a story no one wants to finish. The war came back, and then it ended. And you? You just kept waking up. You don't die the way they said you would. There's no trumpet, no flag, no final charge into glory. There's no crowd of comrades around you, clutching your hand and whispering prayers. You don't even get a last word. No one's listening. You just stop being part of the world one day, like a candle left too close to a draft. One moment you're there, the next you're not. Maybe it happens in a ditch, coughing until your lungs collapse under the weight of every winter you carried home. Maybe your foot slips on a wet cobblestone and the cart doesn't stop in time. Maybe a stranger stabs you for your boots and no one bothers chasing him. Or maybe you just don't wake up one morning. You close your eyes on a creaky mattress in a rented room above a tavern and never open them again. Either way, it's not a story anyone tells. Your death isn't recorded, not properly. Someone writes it down eventually, misspelling your name, guessing your age. Former soldier, they might write if they bother. Indigent, unknown family. If you're lucky, the priest mutters a prayer over you. If not, the gravedigger drops you in the trench without a second look. You're buried with others, men like you, forgotten in groups because it's cheaper than remembering them one by one. There is no monument, no statue with your name carved into marble, no tearful widow clinging to your uniform, no weeping child told you died for a noble cause. You outlived the people who once pretended to care, and the people who never did will outlive you. You become paperwork, ashes, a shallow mound somewhere no one visits, a footnote on a footnote, destined to erode with the rain. The war you survived never truly ended. It just faded from conversation. The town no longer holds memorials. The stories dried up. The boys who once asked you about battles grew up and stopped asking. The medals you kept in a drawer were sold for bread, or lost or melted down. The uniform you couldn't bear to wear again rotted in a chest that no one will open. When someone finds it, years from now, they'll toss it without looking. Just more old fabric, just more clutter. You're not in the books. They don't write about men like you. They write about generals and emperors, dates and treaties, movements on maps drawn in ink instead of blood. Your part in it all was too small, too dirty, too real. They don't talk about frostbite or starvation or the 1,000 small humiliations of dying slowly. They erase you, not with malice, but with convenience. You don't fit the narrative. You never did. The people who knew you don't pass down your name. You had no children. Or if you did, they had no reason to remember. You were never kind, not after the war, never warm, never whole. You scared them or bored them, or simply vanished from their lives like smoke slipping through a crack in the door. And so you disappear, first from conversations, then from memories, then from time itself. You spent years thinking survival meant something, that making it home, broken or not, gave you a claim to the future, that you'd be honoured, remembered, even pitied. But no one builds memorials for shadows. You lived through hell, but the world kept turning without you. No one owes you a thing, and that, it turns out, is exactly what you'll get. Your death is quiet, undramatic. Not because it wasn't painful, it was, but because pain without an audience doesn't count for much. The bartender shrugs. The landlady rents the room to someone else by the end of the week. The spot where you collapsed is cleaned up, and no one mentions you again. If anyone asks, they'll say you were strange, that you drank too much, that you never talked about the war or talked about it too much, or couldn't stop crying when it snowed. Somewhere a historian might write a line about the suffering of Napoleon's men, a vague sentence about hardship and loss. You're in there technically, but you're not the story, you're just the cost. Maybe that's all anyone ever was. You don't get a legacy, you get forgotten, because that's what history does to soldiers who lived too long and mattered too little. You were useful once, as a body in a uniform, a name on a list, a warm hand to hold a musket, but the war is over now, and France has moved on. You are not France, you never were. You are just one more man who marched too far, ate too little, killed too young, and died too late. A casualty no one counted, a silence no one noticed. And in the end, your story ends, like most stories from your war. Not with a bang, not with glory, but with a sigh, and then nothing at all. That brings us to the end of tonight's quiet march through mud, blood, and the lives history chose not to remember. If you're still awake, thank you for enduring this slow descent into the war that promised glory and delivered frostbite, hunger, and a grave no one marked. If you'd like early access to more softly told histories of the people erased between battles, along with ad-free audio versions of the episodes, you'll find the Patreon link in the description. Feel free to like, subscribe, and leave a comment about which moment would have finished you off. The march, the musket, or the long silence after the last order was given. And if you're listening on a podcast platform, a rating or review helps keep these quiet stories from disappearing altogether. Sleep well.